Pluma knew it was morning by the song. Every morning as the sun rose, her mother would open her throat and release her first song of the day. The sound helped the sun chase away the darkness, and with these first chirps the animals that slept came back from dreams and awoke. Some of the little creatures who preferred to busy themselves at night bid farewell to the cover of darkness. Into the ground they went after another night's adventure, as others shook their sleep and opened their eyes and ears to the glint of the day. Still cozy in her feather bed, the wings of her mother and father, like great living blankets that kept the cold and rain at bay. Her father, enthralled by their mother's voice, burst into his song, and at the same time leaped up onto the rim of the nest, exposing her and her brother Featherick to the cold morning air. Her father opened his wings, making himself larger than ever, his great robin redbreast alive with songs for the forest. She was in awe of him, fearless as he was of the great height below. The neighbouring birds, not to be outdone, sung from their hearts, and all the forest burst into birdsong. Mother looked down at her with such affection, then bent her neck down and rubbed her beak against her chest as she loved so. And then to Featherick, who she often called Feather, as he joined their mother and father in song, his tiny little voice filling in the spaces between their parents, making the forest sound even more alive on that spring morning. "Sing, little one," her mother said to her, but just as she was about to sing, she heard another voice sneer. "You can't sing." Losing her nerve and catching her song before she uttered a sound, she looked around for this strange new voice, this strange new sound, but saw no one. Everybody else was singing, and she knew their sounds. Pluma felt bad and suddenly ashamed of her voice. She so wanted to sing, but didn't want to spoil the beauty of the moment, and just watched the others' delight in singing their songs. Soon after, her mother had gone to find food, as her father stood guard over the chicks. You could tell he found this a little frustrating, for he would much rather be flying around the forest inspecting things, as he so liked to do, rather than babysitting. But still, he took his task as serious, for there were many dangers for little birds who could not yet fly. He walked up and down the branches, looking out for any danger, like a tiny soldier on duty, his big chest puffed out, and a shrill cry at an unwelcome visitor, like that nosy magpie who came too close. Father's wings were folded neatly back behind him as he patrolled up and down. Pluma watched as he walked fearlessly along the branch. Pluma didn't want to admit it, but she was afraid of heights, and peered over the nest at the long, long way down. Soon she would be expected to fly, just to step off and fly, as her mother had explained. She got goosebumps just thinking about it, and she was no goose. Suddenly, out of nowhere, her mother appeared at the edge of the nest. Automatically, they bent their heads back, stretched up, and opened their mouths as wide as they could, as Mother dropped down a slippery slice of wiggly worm into their throats. Delicious, she thought, as the worm slipped down into her stomach. Her mother looked at the two chicks, who looked back at her, hungry for more. "Well, there's nothing wrong with your appetites," said Mother, and with that off she flew in search of more. Pluma squawked in pain. Featherick, trying to move, had stood on her foot. He was always flapping his wings about, imitating their parents. Just then he climbed onto the ledge, his wings outstretched, and was just about to fly, making Pluma gasp at his daring. "No!" she cried, and just before Featherick stepped off the dizzying height, Father flew to the rescue, and wrapping him in his wing, knocked him gently back onto the nest, right on top of Pluma, who, now annoyed, shouted, "Get off me, you great oaf!" Frederick blushed with the humiliation of it all and gathered himself in the corner and then pretended to be asleep rather than say anything to anyone at all.
"What a silly,"
she said to herself.
"He's too young to fly."
She looked at both of their feathers. They were not yet grown enough to fly, she thought to herself with both satisfaction and a little dread. "Another week," said their mother to them yesterday.
"Another week!"
cried Frederick in protest, but Pluma was glad of the time, but now it was only 6 days.
"Oh dear,"
she thought to herself,
"oh dear,"
and went back to sleep. It was later that day that she heard the mysterious voice again. Her mother had come back with more worms and was tired from flying. Pluma had cozied under her wing. It was her favourite place to be in the whole world, her head against her mother's chest, and like a drumbeat she listened to her mother's good heart and let the dreams take her away. With her dream she was flying high above the forest she called home. She flapped and flew and soared higher and higher, dizzy with excitement, chasing the sun into the heavens. She looked for her father, then her mother and Frederick. Where were they? She panicked and felt alone. She spun around and looked up, then down and around, but they were nowhere to be seen. Then she looked down, but all she could see was the sky. She looked up, there too was the sky, and to the left and to the right, only sky. She felt scared and alone, as if the world had left her. Then she heard that little voice again.
"Huh? You can't fly."
She panicked when she realized the truth of it. She was flying and could not fly. Pluma started to fall, and the sky turned into the ground and was coming up towards her. She panicked and flapped her wings, but her feathers were only baby feathers and couldn't hold the wind. But then from nowhere came her mother's voice. "Hush and settle, child." She opened her eyes and found herself in the nest where she had been all along. "It's just a dream, sweetie," said her mother, and she told her about dreams and how they make up things, and that of course she could fly. Tired from dreaming, she slept a dreamless sleep, and when she awoke it was evening and time for song again. Her father sang to the approaching night. His voice soared through the forest and was greeted and joined by all the other birds nesting, their little chicks joining in, adding their little bits to the triumphant sounds that filled the forest that night. The night creatures awakening from their day of slumber, hungry once again. Pluma sat there amidst all of this in silence, her head hung low. She was broken-hearted. All around her were such beautiful sounds. Even the trees sang with their leaves and branches in the wind. Her father looked proudly down at his brave son, singing his heart out, so keen to fly, and then to Pluma, and it distressed him so not to see her try. "Why don't you sing, child?" he said to her when the song was over.
"I can't,"
she replied. "What?" he said in surprise. "A bird that cannot sing? I've never heard of such a thing." Then he laughed, not meaning to be cruel, for he had never heard of a bird thinking something so absurd and say such a thing. Pluma, exhausted from the emotions of the day, started to cry. She felt worthless. She couldn't sing, and even in a dream she couldn't fly. "Hush your crying now, child," said her mother. "All birds can sing, including you. You can talk, can't you?"
"Yes,"
said Pluma. "Well, if you can talk, then surely you can sing," replied her mother, and went on to say, "It's only humans that tell each other such stories and believe such things."
"What's a human?"
asked Pluma to her mother. "Humans are creatures who, instead of wings, have arms with hands that can make so many things. They walk on the earth. They have great power and sometimes dreadful anger. We have to be very careful of them. Some of them are kind and give us food and shelter. Others try to kill us and eat us. But it's difficult to know the good ones from the bad ones." Pluma was startled by this.
"Eat us?"
she said in a scared little voice.
"Why would they eat us?"
she asked. "Why did you eat the worm, Pluma?" asked her mother.
Because I was hungry,
she said, and looked up at her mother, waiting for her to say something more, but she didn't. Instead, with her giant wing, pulled little Pluma in even closer to her. Don't worry about such things, child. Tomorrow will be another day. And with that her mother nuzzled against her father, who put his great wing around them both protectively, his other wing nuzzling Featherick as he stroked him gently with his fine beak. The 6 days had passed, and each day Pluma had marvelled how her body and that of Featherick's had changed. Their feathers had grown with all the worms they had eaten, and today was the day that they were to fly. "You're not babies any more," said their father. "It's time to fly and find your own worms, so that one day you can have a family of your own."
a family of my own.
Thought Pluma. She had never thought of that, but the thought of it made her cry. "Why are you crying, little one?" asked her mother, distressed at her child's unhappiness.
What kind of mother would I be? A bird that cannot sing or fly,
said Pluma, for she still had not sung. Featherick was so good at singing now he was starting to sound almost as good as their father, who had spent all week stopping him from trying to fly too soon. "Oh, my dear, where are you getting such ideas from?" said Mother. Pluma thought about this and said,
from the little voice.
What little voice?
asked Featherick.
I don't know, I looked but I couldn't see it,
replied Pluma.
I heard a little voice last week and I was going to sing and it said, ha, you can't sing, and I looked but I could see no one or no thing.
That's just doubt, little one, said her father.
Who is doubt? Where is doubt?
She cried in frightened frustration at them all. Featherick wanted to know who this Doubt was too. He was very angry at Doubt for telling all these lies to his sister and wanted to protect her from the Doubt. Doubt isn't a he or a she, said Mother. Doubt is your voice inside you telling you you can't do something.
My voice?
Said Pluma, confused. Yes, dear one, we all have doubt from time to time. Sometimes it's your friend, sometimes it's not, said Mother.
When is it your friend?
Asked Pluma and Featherick at the same time. Her mother looked at her father as if she was lost for words, hoping he could help her. Her father thought about this, looking for a good example to give the children. Then he thought about something, flapped his wings with great authority and said, If you were a human baby up here in the nest today, and we were telling you to go to the edge of the nest and just fly across the forest like we do, would it be good to have a doubt?
No,
said Featherick too eagerly, and not really thinking it through. Everybody looked at him, and very quickly he felt that this was the wrong answer. Pluma thought hard and thought it through, and then said,
Doubt would be good.
Why? Asked her father. This was always the hard bit with father. He would always cross-examine you to see if you fully understood.
Because humans have hands and no feathers. You need wings and feathers to fly,
she said, proud of the answer, and flapped her wings with satisfaction. Her mother cooed with delight, and Featherick's eyes lit up at the answer and said happily,
I have wings and feathers, I can fly,
and laughed at the thought of it. Then he said to his sister encouragingly,
You have wings and feathers too, you can fly,
and laughed again even more than the last time. Seeing Featherick so full of merriment cheered her up immensely, and suddenly she was pleased he was her brother.
But how do you know a good doubt from a bad doubt?
She asked her parents. This time her mother answered and said, Well, when you have a doubt, you need to think about it. Sometimes you're afraid because you haven't done something before, and sometimes there is a danger, and doubt keeps you safe. It's good to listen to doubt, but it's also good to listen to your heart. Your heart is full of courage. If you really want something, then just thank doubt for its opinion and follow your heart, little one.
But what if I'm afraid?
Asked Pluma, still unsure.
Do it anyway,
said her father encouragingly.
Were you ever afraid, Father?
She asked in such a small voice.
Every day I'm afraid, little one, just a little bit,
he replied. You are? Said both chicks together, surprised, for all they saw was courage and strength.
Yes, little ones, and that's why I'm still alive. I'm big to ye, but to the world I'm only a little bird, and there are so many creatures bigger and stronger than I am that would gladly put me in their tummy for the dinner. So many times I had to fly for my life, as did your mother, who was also afraid.
You were? They both said to their mother in amazement. Yes, she cooed. Fear and doubt are tools that help us live, but we don't live for them. They are just things we have, like wings and beaks and feet. Everything is here to help us have our lives if we just learn to use them right. So don't worry, little ones. You have much more courage than fear.
How do you know?
Asked Frederick. At this she just sighed and said, Because I'm your mother, and I say so. Father thought this was funny and laughed. Then he said, Okay, enough talking. Time to fly. Pluma felt the fear in her belly, but it didn't seem so bad now. It was more like excitement than fear. Her father stepped out of the nest and onto the branch, and then her mother did the same on the other side. Pluma and Frederick climbed onto the edge of the nest and looked down. It was surely a long way. Her father said, When you count at 3, 1, 2, 3. And all of them took a giant leap into the air. Pluma could feel the air in her face, the ground racing beneath. She flapped her wings and she flew as hard as she could and turned left and then right. She went up and down and around, and she heard the most beautiful singing she ever heard. She was no longer afraid, but happier and freer than she had ever been, having only ever been in the egg and then the nest. But where was the singing coming from? It was so loud and beautiful, but it wasn't her brother or her father or mother. Then she realized it was her. It was her voice that was filling the forest with song. How happy she was to be alive in the beautiful forest with her family. She sang her heart out and thanked doubt for being doubt and courage for being courage, and realized that her mother was right. She did have more courage than doubt. And one day she would lay eggs like her mother and know the right things to say to her little chicks if they were afraid and doubting themselves. The bird family flew the whole day through until tired they came back to the nest and all snuggled up together and sung the song to the forest to wake up once again all the creatures of the night. Book 2, coming soon. In Book 2, Pluma, now grown up, on the day that she and Frederick are to find mates and build nests together, their tree and all the forest is cut down for a new road. In the confusion, Pluma gets separated from her family. She gets trapped by a falling tree, breaking her wing badly. Near death, she is found by Sarah and Daddy, who've had their own tragedy not so long before. After a dream, Daddy brings Sarah and Pluma to find old May, that is, if she's still alive. Feeling lost in the forest, Sarah insists on following a butterfly, which eventually leads them to old May, who is still alive and very mysterious. She is living in a hollowed-out ancient living tree with only animals as friends. Old May cannot fix Pluma's wing, but she knows those who know more about wings than anybody else. Soon they find themselves shrunken and deep within the earth amongst the fairies. But the fairies have their own problems, as the men with their work above will soon start fracking for gas and will destroy the world below. Please log on to thinkriley.com for all of the latest adventures of Pluma and more of my projects. Thank you very much.